Big week in politics. Trump is sticking to his plan to avoid any more debates after the last one, which is a big deal because this is still a debate week, while Harris vocally challenging him to a rematch.
Their debate should not be the last word. I'm trying to debate Donald Trump again, and I think he should debate again. And as you say here in Las Vegas, I'm all in. I'm all in.
The vice president seems almost thrilled about the reality that she is all in, proposing another debate, and he is running from it. But you know the big news if you follow politics, because Trump won't do another debate. Usually there's more than one in the general election between the nominees. I can tell you that tomorrow, by the current schedule, will mark the last debate of this whole presidential cycle. The running mates, of course, facing off for the first and only time in their debate tomorrow. Senator Vance arrived in New York today. Governor Walz is in Michigan with his team. And we are told, just like the nominee debate, the running mate debate also has weeks of debate prep. Transportation Secretary Buttigieg stood in for Vance and Walz's preparations, while the House Majority Whip, Tom Emmer, also a Minnesotan, played Walz for Vance. Now, vice presidential debates are not known for deciding the race. But remember, these two campaigns are statistically tied in all the key swing states, which means even small developments, let alone a big gaffe, could still matter a lot tomorrow night. The Harris campaign is riding on momentum from endorsements right now. Some are expected and simply useful for a Democratic base, like the New York Times editorial board formally backing Harris today, which you can see here, along with the prestigious New Yorker magazine. Neither outlet was expected to go MAGA. Other endorsements for Democrats, though, have come through that would have been unthinkable before the Trump era. Top General McChrystal, who you see here, speaking out in his support for Harris today, or those big Bush Republicans like Dick Cheney and former Attorney General Gonzalez coming out for Harris as well. Now, that tough and controversial general, you might recall, was actually relieved of duty for brash criticism of Biden all the way back in 2010. Now, he's not only endorsing Harris, but speaking out in articles and interviews about her character, and the stakes.
When we look at Kamala Harris, we look at her history. She came up as a prosecutor, an attorney general, into the Senate. She has lived a number of experiences that I think builded someone the kind of character that's going to be necessary in the presidency. We should elect them for the character because we don't know what's going to come up.
You don't know what's going to come up. That's a person who's definitely exercised command positions, life and death. And this wider embrace of Harris by veterans of national security and conservative politics, these individuals, it is exactly what Vice President Harris discussed and tried to highlight before that big audience at the debate.
I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace.
Now, that was just then. The endorsements now coming in. Early voting is underway. And then, as for the more traditional Democratic support that I mentioned, that New Yorker cover and its endorsement making the rounds today, the magazine explaining that endorsement by calling Harris the sensible, humane, and liberal-minded choice, saying much of this is beyond debate. The Times endorsement notes that Kamala Harris is a contrast to Trump standing alone as a dedicated public servant who's demonstrated care, competence, and an unwavering commitment to the Constitution. Now, Harris is balancing campaigning with governing today. Just as last week, remember, she took time off the campaign trail to meet with Ukraine's leader amidst that war over there. Today, she canceled her campaign events and is addressing the devastation from Hurricane Helene. We can report that across the South, at least 116 people are dead, hundreds more missing. And you can see here just some of the thousands of destroyed homes and businesses that are visible here, the devastation. FEMA briefed the vice president on the rescue and recovery efforts. This photo is courtesy of her office, and she just late today spoke from FEMA headquarters.
And over the past 24 hours, I have spoken with Governor Kemp of Georgia, Governor Cooper of North Carolina, and many local officials. I have shared with them that we will do everything in our power to help communities respond and recover. And I've shared with them that I plan to be on the ground as soon as possible, but as soon as possible without disrupting any emergency response operations, because that must be the highest priority.
The vice president there discussing the priorities and what she learned in the briefing. For his part, Donald Trump visited southern Georgia in response to the storm and has addressed it. He also held rallies in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania over the weekend. And while Trump's aides and his Republican allies say there are many issues and policies to be running on, Donald Trump is doubling down on the rhetoric and the insults and conspiracy theories that he has long used as a political and PR kind of ploy to try to hijack political attention via outrage. Now, this is an old playbook. Sometimes what we're seeing over this weekend involves a more extreme version that we shouldn't normalize, but a more extreme version of what is fundamentally the same playbook. And that does present now familiar challenges. And this is true for citizens, for people in politics, for people in the press. When you're faced with this, when do you confront and fact check these kind of claims? And when do you decide, again, as a citizen or whatever role you see yourself, to decline the temptation of outrage driving overreaction to this individual? I can tell you the New York Times reports that Trump's weekend addresses were notably escalating the attacks. They were dark and often rambling. Other outlets fact-checking false claims and lies by Trump about his opponent and about immigrant communities. Trump also openly vowing to abuse government power, something we've reported on many times here, including the evidence of how he's done so in the past, sometimes rising to crimes, sometimes not. He darkly suggested that Kamala Harris should be impeached and prosecuted. So Trump is now, having crossed this next line about Harris, he's now publicly, loudly agitated for the prosecution of every Democratic nominee he's ever faced. The first one, Clinton, who drew more votes in 2016 but did not win the Electoral College. The second one he faced, the current president, who beat him handily. Remember, Donald Trump's first impeachment was over his convoluted and failed foreign plot seeking the prosecution of the Bidens in Ukraine, a place that has much bigger problems than Donald Trump's attempted bribery shakedowns. And now, completing this is Harris. And this part of what I mentioned is this tendency he has. It is larger than rhetoric. Donald Trump's plans to wield power in the second term are available for scrutiny. They are more extreme than the first term, with whatever you already think of the first term and know about the first term. And so it goes beyond rhetoric to his attempt to normalize what he would really do. But while I am being careful to mention these things and not treat them as just ignorable or normalized, I'm not playing clips or footage of the lies. One of the reasons that you have to be careful with ever taking Donald Trump live is precisely to review what is worth airing. And what I'm showing you to know about is not something that we think rises to the standards that we are choosing to air it. There are also politically, and this is a political race, signs that what I just referred to is not working anymore for Donald Trump the way it used to. It's possible politically that it helped Trump somehow in that very first time that he tried the move of vowing the prosecution of then Hillary Clinton, his nominee, the Democratic nominee. That was back in 2016. And remember, the Trump attacks also merged with what had been years of talk about both Clinton's legal issues, some real, much of it exaggerated, especially with regard to her. But now we're in the third installment of this. And if it is politically failing, which is a separate point from whether it is valid, acceptable, consistent with democracy or law, but whether it's politically failing, that brings us to how Donald Trump's own allies and other concerned parties in the GOP are knocking this. They don't think this is working. They think just about anything would be better.
I think we should stick to the issues.
I just think the better course to take is to prosecute the case that her policies are destroying the country.
I've said for years that Trump's divisive rhetoric is something that we could do without.
That's just a smattering of the reaction to the most recent. And so we are witnessing something here that is familiar, and for some people might be fatiguing. Of course, a lot of important things can be tiring, but also has notes of a different possible outcome. Again, that always depends on everybody, you watching or listening to this, everyone else in the country who has a role to play. But it does have signs of something different. There is not a complete meltdown overreaction to every single thing he says or lies about, nor should there be. That's a journalistic assessment. And there is more of a concern growing in public among the people who still want Republicans to win in 36 days that this might not be it.